Aloha, everybody. It is I, the Great Clement, and ladies and gentlemen, this past weekend marked the 20th anniversary of a super popular Nintendo franchise. And when I was going through my Twitter feed and I was seeing all the people I follow talking about this franchise and talking about all their experiences with it, it really brought me back to being in junior high. I had a sudden swell of nostalgia because I just remembered everything about this franchise all of a sudden. I remember growing up with this franchise, and even though I'm not like the biggest super mega fan of it, I sort of trailed off of it from the mid 2000s till 2013, I want to say. But this franchise left a big impact on my life, and it was a big impact on, my growing up. And I figured it'd be cool to talk about my experiences growing up with Pokemon. Pokemon is 20 years old now. Red, blue, and yellow have been around for quite a while. And now you can download those three games on the Nintendo eShop for your 3DS. So if you never experienced those games before, you can download them now. Nintendo did not plug me. They didn't give me money to plug that. I'm just saying. But it's nostalgic, man. Pokemon is back. The old Pokemon. Pokemon never went away, but it's always been there. But like the 20th anniversary stuff and the fact that we're celebrating what was, and I remember Twitch apparently was airing all the Pokemon movies and stuff. So there was like Twitch watches Pokemon. And I was like, okay, that's kind of fun. And I was remembering the movies, and I was remembering the show, and I was remembering the games, and I was remembering everything about junior high, high school. So I figured why not talk about my experiences with Pokemon. I think it'd be fun to share with my audience, especially if you're really young and you weren't there when Gen 1, Gen 2 were new. Because when Pokemon first arrived on the scene, it was a mega wave. It was just an explosion of popularity that, like, I don't think it ever really got there ever again. It's still popular, don't get me wrong, but we never saw, like, James Vanderbeek introducing Pokemon the movie 2000, Like, it was crazy popular in Pokemon in the 90s. Oh my god, but, yeah. So I figured I'd just talk about my experiences with Pokemon. I promise this won't be a 2 hour, this won't be a 2 hour discussion. I will make this like an hour to an hour and a half, if that. I didn't really play all the Pokemon games, so I don't really have too much to cover. But, in junior high, I was like 8, 9 years old when Pokemon first came out. I did have a Game Boy, but I didn't really play too much on it. I had Super Mario Land, which I got good enough at that game to be able to beat it every lunch hour at school. Like, I'd go from the first level all the way to the end in my lunch hour and still have enough time to do what I want and then eventually go to class. So I got Mario Land memorized. I've memorized that soundtrack, that game over and over to death, But I also had Tetris, which I played every now and then. I had Dr. Mario. I had Mario Golf. And I don't mean like the N64 Game Boy Color Mario Golf. I mean just golf. It was like the 1991-92 just golf. So that was the only Game Boy experience I had. I never really played Mario Land 2. I never played Wario Land. I didn't play my Game Boy for much. I mostly spent my time on Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis. I was much more into consoles. And Game Boys back then were so annoying to play. Like, you gotta remember, kids, we didn't have backlights back then. We had the brick Game Boy at first, where, like, you have to have the right lighting in order to see what you're doing. I couldn't just play Pokemon in the dark. I have to be playing Pokemon in a well-lit area because otherwise I can't see what I'm doing. Like, if it's the lights are out and you're trying to hide from your mom that you're not sleeping, so you're actually secretly playing Pokemon under the covers and stuff, you need like a flashlight or something because you're not going to be able to see it. And of course, back then I didn't have a charger either, so it would waste batteries, and then I had to bug my parents for batteries, and I had to buy some batteries, and it was a whole thing, the Game Boy Color and stuff. Now with like the 3DS, the Vita, the PSP and stuff, they come with a charger, and you can just plug it into the outlet, charge it up, bing. They have a backlight, so if you want to play it late at night, that's great. I could play Pokemon X and Y at like 2 in the morning, and I don't need to like turn on all the friggin' lights and stuff. Also, I'm a grown-ass man, so I don't need to hide from my mother. But, the point was, it was a different time when I was a kid in the 90s, you know? It was a different time. And, I didn't have any Game Boy games, is basically what I was saying. I had Mario Land, and I played the hell out of Mario Land. But when Pokemon first arrived in the scene, I remember I saw the commercial at first, and it was just about, like, I think it was a vacuum that was, like, sucking up all the different creatures, and I didn't think much of the commercial. I was like, okay, I don't know what that is, but cool. But then the anime hit, and it was on YTV for me, the Canadian kids channel. And, you know, anime was just starting to get popular. I mean, I remember when I was in junior high, anime was just sort of like, you had Sailor Moon, you had Dragon Ball Z, and you had Pokemon. And eventually it spawned stuff like Digimon, and, well, Digimon might have come out around the same time as Pokemon, but you had like Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And all this other stuff afterwards. But for me, there was only three, right? It was either Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, or Pokemon. And Pokemon just happened to air exactly as I got out of school. Like, I would get home at 4 p.m., and 4 p.m. is when Pokemon was on. So I just got home at the exact time when it turns on. So I would actually rush home from school to make sure that I caught the episode, because I didn't want to miss it. Because Pokemon, I knew it was a Nintendo franchise, I was big into video games, I was a budding gamer, and I really wanted to see what was up with this Nintendo cartoon, right? And there's something appealing about the entire structure of Pokemon, and the fact that, like, it's a game where you collect a whole bunch of creatures, and then you use them to battle other creatures, so that you can win gym battles, so that you can get badges, so that you can enter the Pokemon League, so that you can be known as a Pokemon Master. Like, Pokemon trainers are a thing. Kids, they just get up one day and they tell their parents, you know, I don't need school. I don't need money for food. I don't need to spend money for a hotel or anything. I'm just gonna walk the road. I'm just gonna catch wild animals that could possibly maul my face off in my sleep. And don't worry, Mom, it's gonna be okay. I'm gonna go catch Pokemon, because that's gonna be fun. That's gonna be awesome. So, it's a little dumb when you think about it. I mean, we never thought about it when we were kids, you know? We never thought about, like, shouldn't he, like, have to finish high school, this Ash Ketchum? Shouldn't he be, like, I don't know, more educated? Especially because he comes off like such an idiot in the show sometimes. Like, what kind of world is this where they're not even 18 yet, and the parents are just like, okay, enjoy your Pokemon journey. I won't see you forever, but send me a postcard. Become a Pokemon Master Sport. So, but, you know, I loved it. I was so interested, and I told my mom, like, I gotta get Pokemon. And she was like, yeah, when we have the money for it, we'll get to it. So I never really got Pokemon for a while. I think it was out for at least a year or two. Whenever Pokemon Yellow came out, that's when I got it. I never had Red and Blue. I actually had Pokemon Yellow. So I had the version where your first starter is Pikachu. I didn't even have the experience of having Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. Like, that was the best thing about the original game. You could choose which of the three you wanted. Did you want the Fire Dragon? Did you want the Plant Guy? Did you want the Water Turtle? But I never got that. I had Pikachu, and Gyarados had Eevee. And depending on how well or how badly you did against that first battle, Gary might get a Jolteon, or a Vaporeon, or a Flareon eventually, because that's what Eevee can evolve into, all these different things. And, you know, I was already watching the show by the time I got Yellow, so I was big into the show, and I loved all the little show references. Like, one of the Team Rocket grunts that you usually fight, they get replaced with Jesse and James. You know, James and Jesse were the antagonists in Yellow. They weren't like the big antagonists. It was still Giovanni and all the Elite Four and stuff, but they were there. You fought them like 2 or 3 times, and I thought that was fucking cool. I was like, oh my god, it's Team Rocket! Like, the Team Rocket I know from the show. Oh my god! But when I did get Yellow, it was fantastic. I had so much fun just catching all those Pokemon. Actually, I guess now that I think about it, I was blessed when I got Yellow, because you can get all 3 of the starters from the Red and Blue. You can get Charmander, Squirtle, and Bulbasaur from random townsfolk in Yellow, so I actually got the best deal, quite frankly. But you know, Yellow was a fun time. I think what really drew me in, especially when I first started playing it, was I did not expect the music of Pokemon to be so good. You know, I didn't expect to be humming those tunes, listening to those tracks over and over and over again. Sometimes I would just leave the Game Boy on, listening to the music, which was, in hindsight, was wasting my batteries, but I didn't care, because, man, I wanted to hear that music. I wanted to hear the Celadon City theme, the Pewter City theme, the Fuchsia City, I can't, I'm trying to think of the one Misty's in. I can't remember it right now. I think it's like, Cerulean City. I love that theme. I do think Pokemon is not the hardest game in the world. I think it's definitely baby's first RPG. I mean, at first it started off a little bit hard because you don't have access to Bulbasaur or Squirtle at the very start. Pikachu can't really do anything to Brock. And neither can the bird types really, because like rock types versus flying types, well, you caught a Pidgey, that's nice, but Pidgey ain't gonna do shit to that Onix. So like you needed like a Nidoran or a Mankey to really make Brock a little bit easier. But once you got to like Misty and all the others, it got a lot easier and stuff. But I love the music. It was so addicting, wandering the grass, looking for Pokemon, trying to see if something new would pop up. Because I didn't use a guide, you know? And again, this game came out in 97, 98 whenever I picked it up, so guides were not really a thing unless you had, like, the actual booklet or Nintendo Power. And even then, there was only so much you could do with that. I didn't learn about GameFAQs until, I want to say 2001, when I was looking up information on Final Fantasy X. I was looking up information on Final Fantasy X, and I saw GameFAQs, and I was like, oh my god, this is awesome! This website's amazing! And also, you know, the internet back then, I had dial-up, so I couldn't use the phone if dial-up was on. And every time you did, it always started off with this annoying, long-ass connection thing where it would go, beep, 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 you know, it'd make this annoying sound. And it was even still then slow as balls in 97, 98. Like, it would take forever just to load, like, one picture of Pikachu, you know? And where was I going to find information? You know, you talked with your friends in high school on where Pokemon were. Like, that was something I actually did. I'd be in class, I'd tell people about all this Pokemon I found in Viridian Forest or whatever, and they'd be like, oh my god, well, I found an Abra on this particular field. Oh, really? I mean, I can't remember if it was Gold and Silver that first did it, or if it was Red and Blue and Yellow, but the other thing was you could look up the Pokédex, and it generally told you what area the Pokemon were in, or if you couldn't find them in a certain area, but, you know. It was a fun experience communicating with my friends about where certain Pokemon were, what was the best types, what was the best combination, who was the coolest gym leader, you know. Oh, Sabrina, man, she's got psychic powers. She's friggin' awesome. Oh, yeah, well, Koga's a ninja. Koga would fuck Sabrina up. I tell you what. I don't know if we said that in junior high. Probably. I think that's when I first started swearing, but, you know. It's all a blur. It's all blurring into my memory. But I had a great time with Yellow. You know, again, I still think it's baby's first RPG. I don't think it was that challenging. Even when I was a kid, I didn't think it was that challenging. In general, I don't think I ever blacked out. You know, I think I blacked out to Brock maybe twice because I didn't have Nidoran or Mankey. But as soon as you get into the thick of it, and as soon as you start collecting all these different types and making sure that you have different types, and it's fine. You know, this is why they make Nuzlocke challenges for Pokemon games. It's never been that challenging of a single-player experience. So players have to make up their own rules. Players have to make up their own set of circumstances in order to make the game a little bit more challenging. And I wonder if Nintendo should really start building that stuff into the games. Like, I don't know who came up with Nuzlocke. I don't know who came up with that concept, but Nintendo should just straight up steal it and be like, okay, that's a mode. Hero mode, you know, super trainer mode, where like if the Pokemon dies, it's dead forever, you know? Or sorry, fainted. If it faints, it's out. It doesn't want to fight anymore. That's what it does. Because Pokemon don't die. Unless you go to Lavender Town, in which case Pokemon very much die. And it's fucking disturbing, because you can catch a... Can you catch that ghost Marowak? I can't remember. I think you can. But, you need a Sylph Scope in order to see ghosts. Zoink, Scoob, it's a ghost! In retrospect, I didn't hate any of the dungeons in Pokemon. I mean, maybe the Lieutenant Surge bucket one could be annoying sometimes because of RNG. Because, like, you push a switch, and then one of the buckets next to it is going to be the switch that opens a door to Lieutenant Surge. But you always have, like, a possible 3 out of 4 chances to get it wrong. And then you push the wrong button, and it resets, and then the switch ends up in a different bucket, and it's like, oh, come on. But otherwise, I don't mind the sliding puzzles in Team Rocket's base. I don't mind the teleporters in Sabrina's dungeon. I don't mind a lot of stuff about Pokemon. It's an easygoing, very satisfying game. It's a little archaic and a little bit not as convenient if you play it nowadays. I'm sure playing on the eShop version right now, if you download it today, I'm sure you'll notice that. But it's not nearly as good as Pokemon X and Y, but it's still a lot. It's very iconic, and it's a big part of my childhood, you know? It's still something that I remember very fondly, and I do not trade that experience for anything. I did catch all 151. I did trade with a whole bunch of people, and their red and blue versions in order to get all the Pokemon, and I actually did get 151. I didn't get Mew for a legitimate means. I did get Mew through a Game Shark because that was the only way we could do it. You know, I know there's like glitchy ways nowadays to get Mew, but back in the 90s, we didn't know about that. We didn't know anything about that, and so like the only thing we knew was that it was a promotional Pokemon. It only happened at certain tournaments that they would hand out Mews and stuff, and you couldn't actually catch Mew. You couldn't actually find it like you could Mewtwo, so people just like always Game Sharked that stuff. We always just glitched Mew into the game, or cheated Mew into the game, I should say, in order to get Mew. But yeah, I had all of 151, and it was fantastic. As for the anime, Pokemon the show, I enjoyed it for the most part. I mean, I have weird nostalgia for that show where, like, it's not something I'd watch today. It's not, like, there's a new Pokemon show that's still going on right now. It's based off of X and Y. Apparently Ash Ketchum is still training to become a Pokemon master. But, you know, the Pokemon anime was, like I said, there was, like, Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and Pokemon. And I was very much interested in that show, and especially because the characters were so fun. Team Rocket are the best. Jesse, James, Meowth were the best part of that show. I was always looking forward to whatever they were doing. Sometimes there'd be an episode dedicated to just them, where like Ash and Brock and Misty were just sort of in the background, and I was happy with that, quite frankly. Like that episode where like James goes home to his family, and they want him to marry this girl named Jessie Belle, who kind of looks like Jessie. Ash, Brock, and Misty just sort of show up, and they just sort of accidentally stumble onto this Team Rocket plot. And they're just sort of in the background doing their thing. And I guess they kind of save the day at the very end. But that story so isn't about them at all. And I was fine with that, because that's a good story. Anytime Team Rocket were on screen, they were the best characters. I only cared about them. I wanted there to be a spin-off just about Team Rocket, because who cares about Ash and Misty and Brock? Whatever. I care about Team Rocket, damn it. But I remember that show fondly. I remember how frustrated I would get because Ash would constantly let go of his Pokemon. He would constantly let go of his Pokemon. You know, he had a Butterfree, but then it found a cute pink Butterfree, and it wanted to live with the pink Butterfree. So Ash is like, okay, you go, Butterfree. You go live with that pink Butterfree. And it's like, yay! It was super sad, that episode. It was super sad. I remember some of the interesting plot arcs that would happen in the show. Like, I remember the St. Anne stuff, which was like a 3-parter, where, like, first they get on the St. Anne, and then the St. Anne, like, kind of blows up and it, like, sinks into the sea. And so that whole episode is the heroes and Team Rocket trying to get out of the St. Anne as it's falling apart and stuff. And I remember the first episode was great because James wastes all his money on a Magikarp, which is something that actually happens in the video games, too. Like, you go to the Pokemon Center just before Mount Moon, and this guy's, like, selling a Pokemon, and he's like, oh, it's a big deal, great deal. And then as a kid, you think, oh, sweet, I'm gonna buy a super awesome Pokemon. And you buy it, and it's a Magikarp, and he knows Splash. And he might know Tackle, but he knows Splash, and Splash does nothing, and it's just this flopping fish, and you're like, what the hell? And then you find out later, any old rod that you just pick up from anywhere could find a Magikarp. And you're like, that That guy ripped me off. Anyone could catch a Magikarp. What the oh my god! And the show was great because it actually referenced that with the Team Rocket plot where James spent all his money on this Magikarp. It's the carp, the king of carp. And it was a waste of money. Until that thing grew big and turned into a Gyarados, in which case they were screwed because it blew them all over the place. And that's what the third episode was about, was they were all separated. The Pokemon were separated on this island. And I think that we actually got to see what they said now. I think there were subtitles where like the Pokemon were talking to each other and we could actually understand what they were saying to each other. Because they always just talk in the same way. It's always Pika-Pee, Pikachu, Pika-Pee, Bubba, Bulbasaur, Bubba, Bubba, Squirtle, 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 Charmander, Char. You know, they would just do that voices, those voices saying their own name over and over and over again. And apparently they're saying something different, you know. Somehow, Charma is the same as, oh yes, I agree with that. And Charma is the same as, no, that's stupid, I hate you. So, whatever. I remember some of the rumors people would have about Pokemon were like, I remember when Giovanni came up and he was the head of Team Rocket, we never saw Ash's father. We always saw his mother, but we never saw Ash's his father. And so a lot of people were like, what if Giovanni is Ash's father? Oh my god, wouldn't that be a crazy twist? Like we were all hoping that was what was going to happen, and it never happened. Giovanni was never related to Ash. There was never this Darth Vader moment where it was like, no, Ash, I am your father. No! You know, that never happened, but that was the kind of stuff, those are the kind of rumors people would have on the playground, because, you know, we got really interested in Pokemon. At school, Pokemon took over. It was a huge wave. All of a sudden, I never saw so many kids have a Game Boy. You know, before I had my Mario Land, and I would play Mario Land, but I didn't see much of Game Boy on the playground. I never saw much of Game Boy in school. I never saw people playing the Game Boy at school much at all. But when Pokemon got big, all of a sudden everyone had to have it. Everyone had to have Pokemon. So I would see people exchanging information, holding Game Boys to each other. One kid would bring a cable link so that they could trade and stuff. And it was crazy to me, you know, like Pokemon just really took over where all of a sudden kids were bringing binders of the trading cards to school. Like literally they'd have binders and they would all be talking about the holographics and what's rare and, oh man, I got this holographic Gyarados. This is really, really rare. This is one of the best cards and only I have it. What are you going to trade me for it? And like people would bring binders of Pokemon cards to school and that was crazy. Like even the teachers, I got the impression they couldn't believe what they were seeing because they couldn't believe how Pokemon had become such a big part of school and how all the kids were obsessed with Pokemon that like even the teachers just really didn't know what to make of it. And, you know, it really was that big where like, I don't know if you go to school today, if people would bring Pokemon trading cards to school. I don't know what the equivalent of that is nowadays. I'm not 8 years old anymore. I don't know if kids are bringing on their yokai watches and being like, hey, look at this fart creature. He's an ass. Ha ha ha. That's a thing in Yokai Watch. There is an ass creature, okay? It's literally an ass that goes into people's bodies and makes them fart. So, I don't know what to make of that. You got problems, Nintendo. Or Level 5 or whoever the hell designed that game, but good God. Now, and speaking of trading cards, there was also the Game Boy Color trading card game, which used the rules of the trading card. So there were even a video game based off of the trading cards, and I never really got into that. I could never wrap my mind around the rules of that, and I never really got good at it. I always said Pokemon was baby's first RPG, but the trading card game, that did take thought, and that did take planning a little bit, because it was a lot harder than it was for me. I couldn't handle it, but, you know. It wasn't my kind of game. I didn't even like using the trading cards. I did buy a deck every now and then, but after a while I just sort of stopped because I was just collecting these cards and I just didn't care about them enough. It was just like, even if I have a holographic anything, I don't care, whatever. You know, it's not important. And then the big thing that happened was the first movie came out. All of a sudden, this show was so popular, Pokemon was so popular, it was all over school. And so, you know, obviously, we got to release a movie in theaters. And it was actually tying in with the anime where, like, we had this Mewtwo subplot going on where when Ash gets to the gym leader of Giovanni, Viridian City Gym, he's going for his final badge, and he actually fights Team Rocket, but everyone else had been fighting something else. You know, Gary Oak got to Viridian Gym, and he fought Mewtwo, who's wearing this badass armor, and Mewtwo just fucking mops the floor with Gary Oak. Just mops the floor and kills him dead. And it was like, oh my god, Mewtwo's in the anime! Oh my god, Mewtwo's so cool! And then there was even an episode where, like, Team Rocket was walking up to, like, Giovanni's base, and all of a sudden, the fucking thing explodes, and Mewtwo just flies out of the sky, and you're like, what the hell is that? That's awesome! And they never elaborated on that. Giovanni just looks angry, and then he flies off after he deals with Team Rocket, and they never elaborated on that. So you had to watch the movie in order to understand that this was all building up to the movie. This was all building up to Mewtwo's appearance and how it was a big part of his story. So I thought it was kind of interesting the anime actually spursed in some movie moments to be like, hey, there's a movie coming out. If you want to know about that creature, you better go see it. And, yeah, that movie, I remember I went to see that thing 3 times. I saw that movie 3 times. And, I still own a DVD of Pokemon, the first movie, by the way. I got it about 3 years ago. And I got it mostly for nostalgic reasons, because I grew up with Pokemon, but it's not a movie that's super funny or super relevant today. It's not something I go out of my way to watch, but, you know, it's nostalgic for me. I like that Pikachu's Vacation short that starts up the thing. I thought Mewtwo was a badass villain. I liked everything that was surrounding him. And it's got a fantastic soundtrack. I remember when the movie was first announced, I would constantly keep seeing M2M's Don't Say You Love Me music video on Much Music because it would just keep playing when that movie was new. And it's fun. I just rewatched that not too long ago, and it's so 90s. I love it. I miss the 90s is basically all I wanted to say. I miss the 90s. But don't say you love me. You don't even know me. If you really want me, then give me some time. Oh man, now that I brought up the soundtrack, how could I forget about the anime's soundtrack? Because while it did have, like, enhanced versions of, like, the game's music, it also had its own custom-made lyrical tracks that they actually made an album for it all called To Be a Master. And I own the To Be a Master CD even still to this day. So, like, obviously the opening song, I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. Boom, 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 boom. To catch them is my real test. To train them is my cause. Like, how could you not love that? That's the greatest opening. Once that theme kicks in, you know you're in for a good cartoon, because that's just too damn fun. But even at the end of the show, the Poke Rap, right? They would put Pokemon names and they would make them into a rhyme, and so that you could rap all 151 of them at the end of the show. And I remember at least one of them. I remember at least one of the verses because for some reason I kept repeating it over and over again through life. And it's Electro, Diglett, Nidoran, Mankey, Venusaur, Rattata, Fearow, Pidgey, Seaking, Jolteon, Dragonite, Ghastly, Ponyta, Vaporeon, Poliwrath, Butterfree. Catch 'em, gotta catch 'em all. Gotta catch 'em all. Pokemon! I still remember that verse. I don't know why I remember that verse. I just do. And then once they introduced the other songs, all of a sudden you got Team Rocket's song. And I don't mean like the chorus they always did, although this is part of that song. Like, not the, to protect the world from devastation, to unite all nations. Oh man, what is it? To protect the world from devastation, to unite all people within our nations, to denounce the evils of truth and love, to extend our reach to the stars above. Jesse James, Team Rocket blasting off at the speed of light. Surrender now or prepare to fight. I think I got that right. I just remember that off the top of my head. So, but we're on the road to Viridian City. They had that awesome techno, like that techno Pokemon song that was like, Pokemon, mon. The journey's just begun. More than ever. Team Rocket's on the run. Friends forever. You got the power. You got the power. You got the power. Pokemon, oh yeah. Seriously, you gotta look up the To Be a Master soundtrack, because they made amazing songs for the anime, which unfortunately are all Pokemon related, so it's all referencing Pokemon stuff. So it's not something you could actually listen to on a club, because if someone ever heard you listening to the To Be a Master soundtrack, they're gonna know you're listening to Pokemon, because they constantly refer to Pokemon. Except for that one track that was like Misty's song. Oh well, even though Ash and Misty kind of talk in the song, but that was weird, because like Misty's song on To Be a Master was like this love ballad, where it was about Misty's hidden feelings for Ash and how she secretly loves him. But that was never really a thing in the show, not really. Like, there might have been some subtext in the second movie, and there might have been some subtext in some of the episodes, but they never capitalized on that, and so... You know, any Ash Misty shippers out there, there was that, you know, you could listen to that song, Misty's song, on the To Be a Master soundtrack and be like, oh, why isn't that a thing? Why isn't that a thing? Oh. But the soundtrack of that CD is amazing. It's amazing to go back and listen to, honestly. It is crazy. And remember, all of this stuff existed before Gold and Silver. Like, Pokemon just exploded. It was so popular. It was so crazy. I even played the N64 games. There was Pokemon Snap, where you drive around this linear track and you just try and take pictures of Pokemon. And sometimes you throw an apple at them, or you throw like this dust ball at them, or you'd play the Poke Flute because maybe they dance to it, and you just tried to get the best pictures of Pokemon. Very short game, very underwhelming to me as a kid. Although it's kind of addictive and kind of fun, but like it's not something I think is that great. It's fun. It's fun if you're a Pokemon fan, but it's not like the greatest thing ever. And then there's Pokemon Stadium, and that actually helped me so much with Pokemon, because then I could throw my Game Boy away and I could play Yellow in the Pokemon Transfer Pack in the Game Boy Tower of Pokemon Stadium, because then I didn't have to waste batteries ever again. Then I could play Pokemon like late at night, like 12 in the morning, because it's on my TV. I could play Pokemon Yellow on my TV thanks to the Transfer Pack. And Stadium was great, because if I think Pokemon's baby's first RPG, then Stadium was like the answer to that. Stadium was like, okay, you can use all your level 100 Pokemon from the game. You can import them with the Transfer Pack, but guess what? Level 100s are still going to have a hell of a time, because the Gym Leader Castle does not scale. It scales the level to you. So like, if you go to take on Brock, all of the trainers, Brock himself, are going to have level 100 Pokemon, and now it's all about the strategy. Now it's all about how you actually handle the weaknesses and making sure you don't get paralyzed or fall asleep and stuff like that. And Stadium was a great game. Great graphics for the time, you know, because like Pokemon looks great on the N64. Pokemon looks amazing on the N64. It was one of the best looking N64 games, where I would say like the models going from N64 to Gamecube didn't really improve that much, honestly. Even from N64 to 3DS. I might be remembering this wrong completely, but I thought the N64 models were fantastic. They were so good. And it was just cool to have, like, the announcer from the anime saying, like, oh, Pikachu did a Thunderbolt! And it was all in 3D, so you got to see your Pokemon doing all their crazy stuff, you know? Sometimes the animations would be a little bit weird, but, you know, they couldn't not do the moves that they have established with whatever Pokemon had the moves, you know? And you could actually use 2 transfer packs to trade between stadiums. So if you didn't have a cable link, but you had a friend who owned Pokemon Stadium, then you could just have him bring over his transfer pack, and then you could trade Pokemon through that. And then I beat all the tournaments. I beat the Gym Leader Castle, and then you have to fight Mewtwo at the very end. And I beat Mewtwo too. And I remember one of my friends was surprised when you beat the game, and you beat like Gym Leader Castle, you beat all the tournaments, you beat Mewtwo, the title screen changes. So when I booted up Stadium at my friend's house, all of a sudden the title screen was different to him, and he was like, why is the title screen different? And I'm like, oh, I beat the entire game. I'm in round 2 now. I'm in the second difficulty of the game. Like, what? Oh my god! It blew his mind. Stadium also has these weird mini games where, like, the one I think is the most cruel and fucked up is the Magikarp one, where, like, all the Magikarps have to hit this buzzer, so they just have to push A to jump and hit this buzzer. And They're on the ground. They're not in the water. They're on the ground, and you have to push A to make them hit a switch, and whoever hits the most switches, whoever mashes A the most, I guess, wins. Or it was more of a timing thing, really. It wasn't a mashy thing, but those 4 Magikarp, my god, put them in a tank of water, you assholes! And of course, I couldn't not mention Pokemon Puzzle League, because Pokemon Puzzle League is one of my favorite puzzle games ever. It's probably my favorite puzzle game ever, just because it has the 3D mode, which a lot of other Puzzle League type games don't have. But it's essentially the exact same game as Tetris Attack on the Super Nintendo, only with a Pokemon skin. And so, they actually have built-in FMV anime clips into the game, too. On an N64 game, that was friggin' rare, man. So, like, you had an opening cutscene where Ash gets a call from Professor Oak, and Professor Oak's like, "Hey, Ash, you should join the Puzzle League. It's gonna be fantastic." "Okay, let's go, Pikachu!" And I love the Puzzle League series to death. I think that's a thing Nintendo absolutely needs to bring back in a major way. My god, localize one of the Panel de Pon games. Make a new Panel de Pon. Just make that a huge North American thing. I don't care if it's a $10 download on eShop. Just more of that series, man. More of that series. Had a great soundtrack and everything. And in multiplayer, I always chose Team Rocket. And Team Rocket have the most obnoxious voice clips in the world. Especially if you choose Arbok. Because if I choose Arbok, every time I do a combo in Puzzle League, it's always Charbaka, 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 Charbaka. While Team Rocket are laughing like assholes. Man, and that was all before Gen 2. Well, maybe Puzzle League came out after Gen 2, but... And then, of course, we had a new game coming out, and throughout the entire anime, we were constantly being hinted at with a whole bunch of new Pokemon. I remember in the first movie, I think that was the first appearance we got of Meryl, and everyone kept calling Meryl Pika-Blue because we didn't know what the hell it was. It looked like Pikachu, it was blue, so why not call it Pika-Blue? It's Pika-Blue! Togepi was a new Pokemon that was introduced in the show. It wasn't something we could catch, so we were like, oh my god, Togepi, what the hell is that? And even in the very first episode of the anime, they introduced Ho-Oh. And that's an early reveal, man. The very first episode of the anime, Ho-Oh appears at the very end, and if you've played the games before you watch the show, you're like, what the hell is that thing? Oh my god! And, so Gen 2 came out, and it was another mega sensation, another mega explosion of popularity, because, oh my god, 100 new Pokemon, and the improvements from Red, Blue, Yellow to Gold, Silver, Crystal. Crystal came out much later, but to Gold, Silver was crazy. All of a sudden now we had a day-night cycle. Like, all of a sudden now Pokemon would appear in certain bushes during the day, and then they wouldn't be there during the night. So now we had to think of, what time of day should I be in these bushes? And it was just cool that, like, a game had a built-in battery and it reflected real time. So when I put in 3 p.m. on my game's time, all of a sudden it's 3 p.m. in the Pokemon world and it's bright and sunny. And when I try playing Pokemon at like 8 at night, it's dark out and everything's dark and the lights are on in the buildings and stuff. It really took advantage of the Game Boy Color in such a great way. And that day-night thing was a great feature, and I'm glad it's stuck with Pokemon since. You know, even when you play Pokemon X and Y, it has that day-night thing. It's such an interesting dynamic to the Pokemon catching. It makes a whole bunch of Pokemon show up at different places, and it's great. And the thing I always am appreciative as well is that it's not like Animal Crossing where, oh, sorry, you're playing Animal Crossing at like 12 in the morning, so you can't do anything. All the shops are closed, all the people are sleeping. Sorry, go play Animal Crossing some other time. No, with Pokemon Gold and Silver, you could play it at like 3 in the morning, and the gym leader's still up for a fight. The trainers are still up for a fight. They're still all wandering the grass because, again, they don't have school. They don't have a social life. They're all just Pokemon trainers, so screw it. But it was a huge improvement. I thought the soundtrack was even better. You know, the soundtrack was so good. Just those Game Boy chiptune music that Pokemon games had back then were so memorable, and they never left your head. Like, I would remember specific tracks. Like, I would remember, like, Route 22 or Route 23, because I just loved walking down the highway to that music. I loved the gym leader battle. I loved the gym theme a lot better than the original. I liked some of the battle themes better than the original. It It just was like the first game on crack, plus the first game, kind of. Because once you beat the Elite Four, all of a sudden, the game opens up and you could actually go back to the previous map that was in red, blue, and yellow. You could actually go back to Pallet Town. You could go back to Viridian City and Celadon City and all these other places because they were in Gold and Silver too. You could get 16 badges, which is something that still hasn't come back, by the way, and that really should be a thing. It would be great if if in the new Sun and Moon game, you could go back to X and Y's world, or Johto, or the Kanto region. It would be so awesome if they could just make another game with like 2 worlds. Gold and Silver was awesome for that because, oh, you beat the Elite Four? Well, it's not over yet because now you're going to try and take on the original trainer from the first game and you're going to get all of his badges again and you're going to go take him on and he's got level 80 Pokemon, level 80s, and he's going to fuck you up. So you got to really train if you want to beat Red. And I was like, Red? His name's Ash. No, his name is Red. And Gary's name is Blue. Oh. Okay, that's weird. So am I playing Gold? Is my guy named Gold? And I got Pokemon Gold new. So Crystal came out after Gold and Silver. It was still kind of Gen 2, but it also added a whole bunch of bells and whistles, including the fact that you could actually play as a girl trainer, which probably should have been in there from day one since Red and Blue, but you know. So technically there is a game in Gen 2 where you can play as a girl, and that is Pokemon Crystal, and that's fantastic. But it was just a much better game in every way. It had so much depth to it. I remember I played the hell out of Gold and Silver, and when Pokemon Stadium 2 came out, I enjoyed playing that game as well, and going through those gym leader castles and those tournaments, and using the Game Boy Tower on that thing so that I could not waste batteries on my Game Boy Color. I didn't really play much with my Game Boy Color, now that I think about it. Once Stadium 1 and Stadium 2 came out, what was the point? I don't need to anymore. But Gold and Silver was an experience. It was amazingly good. And again, Pokemon was still at the height of its popularity, so I remember it was a big deal when the show would actually transition to Johto, and it had the best theme song ever, the Johto theme, which is second to the original theme. Probably my personal favorite, honestly. Just because the Johto theme is so catchy. And we had the second movie, Pokemon 2000, where Ash encountered the 3 legendary birds and Lugia the white bird. And just like the first movie, it had a fantastic soundtrack, and it was a big part of Pokemon Mania. And I have this odd memory of it where, like, I remember I was watching an early Kids WB special where James Vanderbeek and the cast of Dawson's Creek were introducing a trailer for Pokemon 2000. I still have that memory in my head. I don't know why. Because that's how popular Pokemon was. Like, WB was getting their big stars to introduce trailers for this anime movie. Because it was just that popular. And as a kid, I was like, holy shit, it's the Dawson! So, you know. Pokemon was a huge sensation, and with Gold and Silver, it was super crazy, and we had to wait a little bit for another game. We had to wait for Ruby and Sapphire, which would eventually be on the GBA. And this is where my Pokemania kind of stops, because you gotta remember, guys, from 96 to, let's say, 2001, 97 to 2001, around there, that's when I was most into Pokemon. That's when it took over the world. That's when it was the most popular. And you know, after a while, you start to get a little fatigued with it, and I was certainly playing other games at the time as well, where I was starting to play the Final Fantasy series. I was getting into Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9. I was getting into Banjo-Kazooies, and I was getting into PlayStation games like Spider-Man. I was all excited about the new generation, you know. I was so excited about the Gamecube and the PlayStation 2 because they were such a leap from N64, PS1, and I was playing Rogue Squadron 2 on my GameCube, Star Wars. I was playing Super Smash Bros. Melee. I was playing all kinds of stuff, you know? And when Ruby and Sapphire came out, I think it was 2001, 2002, I did get a GBA. And I got a GBA for the Sonic series, honestly, because I really wanted to play Sonic Advance. Because, oh my god, Sonic's on Nintendo now! What kind of world are we living in? Ah! And I did get Ruby. I got Ruby. And some point I got like 5 badges in. And I don't know, I got tired of it. It didn't have the memorable soundtrack that the old games did. I thought there's just something about the 8-bit chiptune music that like sticks with you, you know? It just sticks into your memory. How I could still remember what Celadon City sounds like. I could still remember what Cinnabar Island sounds like to me. But Ruby Sapphire, I couldn't tell you a single song because it was upgraded soundtrack. It wasn't chiptune, 8-bit stuff anymore, but you know, it just didn't stick in my memory. I didn't like the trainer design, and it's a stupid, superficial reason to care about, but like, the boy trainer was like wearing red and he had this white hair with a green bandana, and I was just like, this is so different from Ash Ketchum and the other guy from Gold. This is so weird, and I don't know if I like this trainer. 2-on-2 battles were interesting, but I ultimately didn't really like them all that much. I felt they slowed down battles for me. That might be my memory talking. I don't really remember what it was like playing Ruby Sapphire. I just remember there was a lot of surfing. I remember being like, well, I'm doing it again. Like, I'm going through 8 badges. The story's not really interesting. I'm once again fighting a bad team that isn't Team Rocket. And at some point I just dropped it because I was like, you know what? I'd rather be playing Final Fantasy X. And so I got back to Final Fantasy X because I was a huge fan of 10. And I played the hell out of 10. And by the time I was done with 10, I looked at Ruby and I was just like, I don't need to play it. I'm going to play Sonic Advance 2. I'm going to play this. I'm going to play that. I'm going to play that. I'm going to play that. And at some point, I just never finished Ruby and Sapphire. And then when Diamond and Pearl were announced, I had no interest in it because I didn't have a DS. And I didn't want to pick up a DS because I wasn't a handheld gamer anymore. I've never played Diamond and Pearl. I've never played Black and White. Never played Black and White 2. I did play Pokemon Colosseum on the Gamecube, but I was also kind of disappointed with that as well, because ever since I was a kid, when I was talking with my friends in junior high, we kept talking about how cool it would have been to have a 3D Pokemon game on consoles. Wouldn't it have been amazing to have an N64 Pokemon game that wasn't just battles? Stadium's good, we like Stadium, but wouldn't it have been even better if you could actually walk around, go visit towns, go in the grass, pick up Pokemon and stuff. Even if there were 2 N64 versions and you had to like use a transfer pack to trade, I don't care. That would have been super cool to have a 3D experience where you're actually going around Pokemon in a 3D space. Never happened. But Colosseum came out and I saw the trailers and the commercials for it and I was like, oh, that looks kind of interesting. But it's also kind of weird. The trainer for Colosseum, the lead character, I should say, he looked like the guy from Yu-Gi-Oh! He had like these angry eyes, he had this blue coat, he had blonde spiky hair, and I was like, oh, it's the Yu-Gi-Oh! Guy. Why is there a Yu-Gi-Oh! Guy in Pokemon? Okay, whatever. But then I played it and I just thought like, oh, we're on the right track here. You know, you're sort of visiting different places. It's a 3D Pokemon game where you talk to townsfolk and there's 3D battles. But you can't find random wild Pokemon. You have to steal trainers' Pokemon from them in battles. Yeah, it could have been a 3D world. It could have been bigger than it is, and I just never got into Colosseum. So I returned it to the video store pretty early. I remember I played it for 6 hours. I could have played it for another 4 or so, but I chose to just hand it into the video store and rent something else instead, because I wasn't into it. I did not get into Colosseum at all. Obviously, I still played the Smash Brothers games, which Pokemon were a part of, but I took a break from Pokemon, and that was sort of the end of my Pokemania. And I think I noticed it too, that like, Pokemon wasn't really that big anymore anyway. Because when you're in junior high, Pokemon's huge. Every kid's talking about it, every kid has a Game Boy, every kid is playing it, they're all holding out the trading card binders, and they're trading cards with everybody. But when you got to high school, it just seemed like the craze had died. It seemed like even all of my friends didn't really care about Pokemon anymore, and I kind of shared their sentiment. It just wasn't for me anymore. I wanted to play different games. It just didn't matter to me anymore, so I sort of fell out of it. I didn't really get back into it until Pokemon X and Y, and the reason I did that was because I noticed that you could actually customize the clothes on the character, and it actually looked like a 3D space, sort of like what I wanted back in '98 when I was talking about N64 Pokemon games. It looked like they finally ditched the sprites. Because Black, White, and 2, I saw footage of that. They were still using sprites. They were. There was a little bit of a 3D space when you were walking around, but the battles themselves looked exactly the same as they did, like, on the GBA. And to me, that was kind of dull. I didn't want that. When I saw X and Y, it looked new, it looked interesting. And, I saw a lot of old Pokemon in the trailers, so I assumed it wasn't going to be super filled with all the new types that I didn't care about. I wanted Pokemon that I grew up with. You can have your keychain Pokemon, you can have your Lucarios, and you can have your Bazingas, or whatever the hell they are. I want my Pikachu, I want my Charizard, I want my Bulbasaur, I want all the stuff I grew up with, damn it. And Pokemon X and Y, I played that and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Although I did not find it all that different from what I grew up playing, which isn't a bad thing. Pokemon hasn't changed, fine, that's good. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But Pokemon X and Y has not swayed me into being like, oh, I gotta get Sun and Moon. I gotta get Sun and Moon. Yeah, that's basically all I wanted to say about Pokemon. I just really wanted to do this Clement Talks, this podcast / discussion, to talk about my experiences growing up with Pokemon, what it meant to me over the past 20 years, and I just wanted to talk about the sensation it was and all the things I loved about it back in the day. And I certainly don't think that you're crazy for liking Diamond, Pearl, Black, White, whatever, whatever. You still like Pokemon, it's still for you. It's just not for me. I never called Ruby and Sapphire a bad game. It's when I stopped caring about it, because all the games just sort of felt the same. I'm sure people feel this way about Assassin's Creed. I doubt all of you have played every single Assassin's Creed since 2007, because if you have, my god, are you not bored of that fucking series yet? I'm sure the new Assassin's Creed is fine, but I've played the others and I'm bored of it. I don't want it anymore. That's my feeling with Pokemon. It's like Assassin's Creed, where I just played too much of it, I got exhausted with it. And even when I jump back into it years later with X and Y in 2013, it's still kind of the same game. I don't really need this in my life. But it's still a significant impact on me. It was still a big part of my childhood. I still watched the hell out of the cartoons and stuff. And I wanted to share my enthusiasm. I wanted people to know where I was coming from with Pokemon. This is what I grew up on. These are the things I experienced being a Pokemon fan. I was a huge Pokemon fan back in the day, but it was mostly from 97, 96 to 2001 when, that's when it took hold of me. That was when I was in junior high. And, yeah, it was something else, let me tell you. It was something else. So, feel free to share in the comments section some of your fondest memories of Pokemon, even if they're from periods of time in which I wasn't following Pokemon, because I stopped watching the show. I stopped playing the games after the Game Boy Advance at a certain point. And, talk about Pokemon. What do you like about Pokemon? It's a fantastic series, what can I say? So yeah, happy 20th anniversary, Pokemon. This did not go into an hour and a half like I thought it would, which is good. But look up the To Be a Master soundtrack. It's fantastic. Play the old game. It just came out on eShop. You'll know where I'm coming from. It's something else. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the Great Clement. Toodles.